Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Karin Clarke, and we are at the Karin Clarke Gallery in downtown Eugene, Oregon. And tonight we're going to be having a conversation about living with art and art collecting. The inspiration for this talk is that we are doing a really special exhibit right now. It's called the Resale Show. And this is probably about the sixth time I've done this over 20 years. So it's something we do occasionally. And what it is an exhibit, and in this case, it's just packed with work, mostly from Oregon artists, a lot of mid-20th century artists and educators in this area and it's been a curated show, and it's a secondary market works, which means that these are all pieces that have been in people's homes, in some cases for decades. And they've been loved, they've been cherished, and for whatever reason, people are downsizing, and now it becomes an opportunity for new collectors to come and see this wonderful variety and a chance for these to have a new home. So this has brought up the theme, collect people who used to collect, new collectors, and really what a joy it is to live with art. I asked my wonderful mother, Margaret Coe, who is of course an incredible artist, to speak with me to kind of have a conversation, because this is something we actually talk a lot about, and it's been really a part of our family since the beginning of time. And it's just something that we discuss a lot, and I just always love her perspectives. So I asked her to join me today, and I'm thrilled. So we're going to have a little conversation. I wanted to share first that, I grew up in a family with two professional artists as parents. And so there were a lot of things that we did without.
Oh, yes, we were not spoiled.
Sometimes we didn't have heat, but we always had amazing art on the wall. And maybe our furniture left a little to be desired. No, I don't mean to throw some shade on you there, Mom, but anyway, it was. But we always had this incredible artwork created by my parents that we were surrounded by, and I didn't really realize how special that was, or that it was I didn't really think about it, because you just you're used to what you have as a kid. And until I went to college and I set up my first apartment, and of course just we're getting furniture, kind of finding things, and I just went over and raided my mom and dad's art storage and put things up. And it wasn't until like regular college friends were coming over, and they're like, what's this 18-year-old doing with like these major pieces on the wall? And I'd say, oh, that's my mom's, or that's my dad's. And they're like, what? And then I kind of realized, like, oh, wow, like for the first time in my life, maybe I have, like, there's something special here. Anyway, so thank you for that, because otherwise I don't know what I had, but no, I had a great family. But anyway, so I'm here with my wonderful mother, and this is a really fun topic of conversation. And so I have some questions. And the first one is, when did you start collecting art, like other people's artwork?
Well, it was a long time ago. It was in probably the early 70s. And really, we were not in a position to be collecting other than maybe trading with artists. But I had recently gotten accepted as an artist in the Portland Art Museum Rental Sales Gallery. At that time, the Rental Sales Gallery was in the basement of the museum. And so that's a long time ago. But anyway, I had sold a small piece, just made a little bit over $100. And I was going there with a replacement, and the director at that time of the rental gallery was saying to me about she had this little Charles Haney, which was, about this frame was about this size. The image is, pretty small, it's a little figure head. And she said that he was very ill now and really pretty much was not going to live very much longer, and it was $110. And she recommended I bought it. Well, I happened to have some money, and we were not in a position to buy art at that time, but that I just made that decision because I really was very fond of the regional artists, and Charles Haney was one of my favorites. So I bought that piece, and then we had it for all those years. And a few years back, when you first started doing these shows, I put it in a show just so you'd have the name, you know.
Yeah, because the Charles Haneys do not come along very often, unfortunately.
But anyway, so it
one.
turns out, I mean, the amusing thing is it sold for $1,700.
Yeah.
And I bought it for $110.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's kind of interesting because even regional art appreciates.
Yeah,
you know, but,
absolutely. This almost, my second question you almost just answered.
Oh.
So I don't know, I was going to ask you if you had a memory of a first or a major piece you bought.
Oh,
and so
but I have other memories.
Okay, let's hear another
there's
memory.
Lots of memories here. But I was it was twofold. I decided the first, I don't know what year, you already had the gallery because I bought it from the gallery that I bought.
Okay.
A tremendous David McCosh. It was a very large piece. It was called
November Garden.
No kidding.
November Garden.
Oh,
yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
But see, it was a painting that they kept in their house every time. It was like a major favorite of theirs. And I knew from conversations that his garden had a whole bunch of sunflowers, and it had artichoke plants. Is that he basically planted the kind of plants he wanted to paint.
Okay.
And so so it's kind of interesting because this particular painting, it says it's just like you go out the studio door and there would be this garden, and so he must have had lots of opportunity to work on it. But I studied with David McCosh, and he was really the most major influence as far as getting me to the point where I came out of school as an undergraduate as a professional artist, because that's a level of skill you learned with him and understanding of painting. So it was very great. But the other thing was that although I loved his whole oeuvre, I liked his old figurative things, and I think is that he had this was the best painting I feel that I ever saw of his in his mature style. And one of the reasons was that it was painted on a long time. A lot of times there'll be he likes to keep the transparency or something, or just but this one he built up the paint for a long period of time, and it meant that when you looked at it, of course, it had a few places that were like at the very bottom, there's a blossom that's a little bit darker. So it had some, but it was a mesh of different shapes, and you could continually look at the painting and see different areas where the different kinds of colors, the way they, and the lines, the way they went together was intriguing. It was really a fine painting. So it was, and it was expensive. It was about $9,000.
It was more than that.
Was it? Anyway,
because
I think $9,000 was the price you gave.
I gave you a discount. And then also what you did is you paid for it over time, and you were you'd have a painting sale, and then you'd take your commission and you'd make a payment on it. So you made it work. It wasn't like you just had this money
like
in the
all
bank.
of a sudden $9,000, but it was a major. It's a major purchase, and it was meaningful. I liked having it in. I kept it in my bedroom, and I really found that I think it's very good for painters to actually live with art of work that they feel is kind of challenging to grasp, and it affects your aesthetic, and I think your maturity as in terms of visualizing. So I think it is very valuable. That was like a major step.
Well, yeah, and that kind of leads into my next question. And this is something that I know you're really passionate about. Like, what is it about living with great art that you enjoy so much?
Oh, okay.
I mean, you just spoke to it a little bit, obviously, as an artist, but
that's a very difficult question.
Yeah.
Because so much of this is nonverbal. you know, that art is built from a spirit that is not tangible.
Yeah.
So I think that the impact of art, I think the people who have really lived with art and grew up with it just absolutely have to have art in the house. And but people can get along without it, but they don't realize what it's generating.
What was that story about when you went to Douglas County?
Oh, right.
That's kind of
this
kind of relates. I don't know.
This relates very much to it because I don't usually have the experience of not being around art.
Yeah.
But anyway, there was a period of time, not too many years ago, probably 7 or something like that, and I decided to do some painting in Douglas County. And so I can't remember the name of the little town right before you get to Roseburg, you know, this little town. And there was a motel there, and it was, you know, I always stay in cheap motels, you know, when I'm doing that, because I don't want to, I can't be spending a lot of money on. So I said and it was clean, it was fine. But anyway, the experience that I had, since it was just bare bones and nothing was special, you know, about it, is that I sit there the first day and I just thought, this is kind of like the Bates Motel or something. Is that it seems like a place you would go to commit suicide because it's so bleak. It just seems like it's as if you turn off the spirit or something.
It's a good thing you didn't mention the name of the motel, because that would be fun. Anyway,
well, because it was clean. So
yeah, it was fine.
So it's just that an environment without any art, and art has to be real art, not just, you know, something that's kind of like a poster or something. But anyway, it didn't make that effort because it was an inexpensive motel. Anyway, I thought, well, I'm messing around with this. Anyway,
technical difficulties. These are our new. We used to have this big microphone that everyone made fun of, so I got these little ones. Okay.
Well, anyway, so the first day, and I stayed there 4 days, and each day I went out and did a painting. Let's see, the size of the painting was 20 by 24, a standard size. And first night I came home and I put it on the dresser. And then the second night I came home with it, I put it, so I had a dresser, and then I put the others just leaned against the wall. And the third day when I brought back a painting, I had 2 paintings leaned against the wall where my bed's facing, and then I had a painting here. And so when I was in the room, like the next day, I realized I feel at home. It's like those 3 paintings transformed this Bates Motel into something. It just was something friendly. And so I think that what's generated by a painting is it's something that is spiritual, and it's not really verbal. But it's like a life force or something. And I also had this image that if in certain spaces, that it would be almost like the feeling of being in prison, because and that maybe if you had no windows or anything, you'd feel like it's just very, very depressing. And that it brings. I just thought, well, the primitive brain, you know, the reptilian brain, would just feel the being trapped, you know, the feeling like of an animal is trapped. And if there's windows and there's paintings and things around, then it's like there's life everywhere you look, and it extends beyond the walls. And so I realized from that time I realized people really should have art on the wall, you know, because it's just for their mental health.
Well, you know, another question was and again, some of these you're sort of answering before I'm asking, but what is it that makes you want to, you know, I know you go to galleries and museums a lot and you're appreciating art. What makes the difference in something that you decide, this is something I want to bring home? This is something that I know it's not about, I have a vacant space.
Never.
Because she is still collecting in her 80s, and when a lot of people might be downsizing. So like, I know it's not like, I have a space over my couch or something. You always have your own work. Like, what is it about, you know, like when you're looking at a show like this, you know, what is it that makes you want to go for a certain piece or bring it home? Like, I have to have that.
Well, which happens to me not infrequently.
Yeah, it's dangerous if your daughter has an art gallery.
But, and I think that's really a good question, because there's a level of which it's nice to see what people, you go to a show, and it's always good to see what people have come up with, or, you know, it's like there's a joy to seeing a show, even though these are not pieces that you need to live with. So there's that level of just interest, you know, about what people are doing. And, but what I always go for is something that's hitting me at a much deeper level. Like, you know, the Bakash piece that I just told you about that I bought, that just spoke to so much about my you know, what I was learning and how far he went with that piece. But I think it's I think there's pieces like I bought several over the years, bought several Carl Halls, and one here's also a painter of just enormous ability, and that I really, really love. But I remember two of the pieces. One's a drawing and one's a watercolor, and they were just classic skill, just classic drawing skill. Just as, you know, just nothing. No one drew any better than Carl Hall, you know. And I just, because of that resonated with me, I just really like. I have a little nude drawing of his that I have up, and I enjoy it. But the watercolor that I bought, which I bought a long time ago from the Salem Art Museum, not the museum, Salem,
the Bush Barn. Yeah.
And they were having, after his death, they were having kind of a retrospective and selling things. And this piece was a watercolor, full sheet watercolor, and it was painted. You know, it doesn't say where it was painted, but I recognize because I painted at Cape Arago and Shore Acres a great deal. And there's also there's a place between those two where it's just a little place to park. You could go back, and there's this great open sort of large hole, and along there just anyway he painted it somewhere in there. But I recognized the shapes of the rock formations, and then he also you have a little figure. You have to look at a tiny little figure. He just did it all in that. And that just spoke to me so much, because it was a place I was so familiar with, and the watercolor, you know, the technique is perfection, and his skill at drawing is, and so it was just that meant a lot to me. So it'd be things like that. And the third piece that I bought from him, and I've actually put in this show, was just I thought, as far as you know, I'm such a fan, and always have been, of the 20th century modernist artists that were in the Northwest, and Carl Hall was one of my favorites. And what I liked about him is it's like with C.S. Price and Charles Haney, is that these people had this kind of approach that seemed so experimental in terms of the way they were working. They were really imagining ways to work that were not conventional at all. But it's very earthy and really related to the Northwest mystics, because it's very much about the Northwest landscape experience. And I love that, always have. And I thought that this piece was particularly successful at doing that. That he, even though his skill and inclination were towards classic, really classic work, is that he did a really good job of inventing a sort of a stylistic approach to dealing with that gave a spirit to like a dead tree. And I just thought it was really powerful. And
if this doesn't sell, I wouldn't hate inheriting it.
Well, that's okay. Exactly.
No pressure. No,
exactly.
Any regrets, like, about pieces you bought, pieces that got away that you didn't get?
This is a fun question. This doesn't require as much deep emotional kind of challenge about what it's about art. What it is that I have never ever had a regret about buying art. It just, even though I know that I overdo it, in a sense of I just am so passionate.
I will even sometimes be like, "Are you sure, Mom?"
but I just just in the last few years, like what's probably been 3 or 4 years ago, I decided I wanted a sculpture garden in my backyard. And at first I just put up some of Mark's wooden sculpture and things, but I realized they just wouldn't hold up. And so I had to spend some money to get pieces that were, made out of metal. And one of the pieces that I actually had Judd Turner build for me, was one of Mark's wooden sculptures, but it's, made in stainless steel, so that the piece itself is about this size. But I had him make corten, that rusted stands for him. So there's a nice so the piece stands about 7 feet tall, even though the piece itself is about this size. And this contrast between the rusted corten and the stainless steel, it's just very, very appealing.
I think what happened is that your walls were full, and you just started, so she started going outside.
There's nothing to that, but I planned a garden around these spaces, and I ended up buying, I think, I bought 6 of Judd Turner's, but 4 of them were for that sculpture garden. And so my regret is basically has to do with my husband, Mark. Is mostly noted as a painter, but he's just an extremely good sculptor. And I really think his sculpture, when I have a sculpture around, it's like a little more of his presence than even his painting. Painting was he's known for his painting. And he had made several of these little wooden sculptures. And I would really like to have Judd make more of them. But my tension is between, do I want to run completely out of my savings, and be vulnerable for emergencies and not having, money? Or do I want to continue with my sculpture garden and claim them? So that would be my main regret, is that I can't just keep going with this.
If you sell this, will you commission a sculpture?
I'm torn. This is where I'm torn, is that I've got some things that have to be done to my house. And so my idea of putting it in a show was, if it sells, and if another, because the sculptures cost $10,000 at least, to have made. And so I have to make quite a bit. And so I did put a couple of my favorite paintings in here that were really major paintings. And I thought, well, if they sell, then I can maybe justify commissioning a piece, because I'd love to have. What it does is, my husband actually thought of these pieces as sort of like maquettes for a larger piece. That's what his vision was, and never really had the fun. So in a sense, it's completing something that he couldn't complete, in time. But it does take. It's very expensive.
Yeah, I think he was always like a Jan Zach when he studied sculpture with him. I think I recall Dad saying that, Jan really encouraged him to pursue sculpture, but he was so intimidated by the cost of materials and like, Jan was always just like, imagine like you do something this size. Okay, so the figure is this big. And then he thought, how am I going to get like that much stainless steel or whatever it was?
Yeah, I mean, it's very expensive. The materials are expensive.
It's a hard.
And so it's very gratifying to me to have a piece that I do have, and I regret not having more.
Let's see, just 2 more questions. And again, you've almost mostly answered it. Do you mostly just collect regional art? Are you,
yes.
Is that where your interest is?
But it's more than the practicality, that they're accessible, they're not priced outrageously, there's not a high price tag if you compare it with
other parts,
international art, not at all. so but that's not it. I'm not so drawn. I don't have a desire to go out and collect something, from someone who's making a big name or something. That wouldn't even be something I'd be interested in. What I love is that there's a certain aesthetic to different areas. This is again this sort of invisible thing, but there's that it's like the music in different regions is so different because there's this sort of secret current of aesthetic potential, and it blossoms. And I feel like in the mid 20th century that Oregon art and Northwest art really hit a nice peak, and the Seattle-based artists were sort of identified as Northwest mystics, and a lot of the color was earth color, and people like C.S. Price and Charles Haney just worked with earth colors, and but very experimental and very much getting the soul, creating the soul or the feeling of something. So they were just sort of transmitting this aesthetic, and it was very much influenced by a kind of a comfortable acceptance of the abstraction and sense of invention. And I don't think many people probably know. Robert Huck died so early in his 30s that I don't think many people know. But he just did such great things with abstraction. But he'd have a duck hunter or something. And so I liked his prints really a lot, and have one print of his. But I just find that's exhilarating. It's like from the earth, from the atmosphere, somehow regional art reflects something very deep, and it's hard to verbalize about it. But at that time, art. Now it seems like arts are just doing a variety of different things, but it's like there was a real cohesiveness with intention. I don't think anybody ever used a camera, to get ideas, at that time. It was just came out of drawing and exploring. And so I've always loved that region. When I got out of undergraduate work, those were my influences, and I wasn't looking at pop art or other options that maybe made sense if you were in New York City or something. But I really loved the regional art.
Well, I think that might be a really good place to end. This has been so fun. I actually always learn something. This isn't all stuff I've heard before, so I love it. I wanted to thank Sylvie Peterson. She's been manning our camera, and probably our hands are getting tired of holding it. Anyway, and thank you all so much for joining us. And I hope it was interesting, and please come down and see this show. It's really, really interesting, and every time I walk in, I just feel really proud, and there is just such a great collection of work. Anyway, hope you all are doing well, and good evening.
Good night.